So I used to believe I'd always have more time with her. Even in her 80s, Grandma Ruth still felt like a constant in my life, the kind of woman who wore perfume just to water her garden, who remembered everyone's birthdays without a calendar, and who never let you leave her house without taking a slice of pie, whether you asked for it or not. So when she started skipping breakfast, I didn't think much of it. When she said she was just a little tired, I brought her tea and kissed her forehead, thinking she'd bounce back in no time. After all, she'd bounce back from worse. A broken hip, the flu, losing Grandpa. But that winter, something shifted. Sadly, quietly, almost politely, and we, her family, missed the signs. Until one morning, I found her sitting on the edge of her bed. She was still in her nightgown. She hadn't made coffee. The same woman who used to wake the whole house, with the smell of cinnamon and strong roast, just sat there, hands folded, eyes distant. That was the first time I realized we weren't just losing her memories or her energy. We were losing her, and we didn't see it. Not then, but I see it now, clear as day. There were signs, 5 of them. To be exact, 5 signs that someone you love may be entering their final year, whether anyone says it out loud or not. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a granddaughter who learned too late. And if my story helps you catch something early, helps you make the most of the time you still have, then maybe it's not too late for someone else. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It started with her clothes. Grandma Ruth had always been petite, but that winter, her blouses began to hang differently. Her sleeves looked too long. Her favorite Sunday skirt, one she used to fill out beautifully, slipped down her hips even after she cinched the waistband with a pin. "I guess I've shrunk a bit," she said one afternoon, folding laundry with trembling hands. I smiled and joked, "That's what age does to us." She chuckled, but there was a pause in her eyes, one I didn't understand until much later. She stopped finishing her meals, half a slice of toast left on the plate, a bowl of soup untouched. I thought maybe her taste had changed, or she was just tired of cooking for one. I even brought her favorites, tomato basil soup, peach cobbler from that bakery on 9th. But she'd only smile and say, "Maybe later, sweetheart." Later became never. Looking back, I realized it wasn't just about food. Her body was telling us something. It was beginning to shut down, not all at once, but gradually, like a dimmer switch turning down the lights room by room. Her appetite was fading, not because she didn't want to eat, but because her system no longer prioritized it. It was saving its energy for more basic survival. The weight loss was subtle at first, but by the time we noticed, she had lost nearly 15 pounds in 4 months. It wasn't a diet, it wasn't stress, it was a quiet surrender, one her body understood before any of us did. And I wish I had asked the right questions, not, "Why aren't you hungry?" but, "Is your body trying to tell us something?" Because now I know unexplained weight loss in older adults isn't just about nutrition. It's one of the clearest, most under-discussed signs that something deeper is happening. What came next wasn't just physical. It was the way her presence began to fade, even when she was sitting right in front of me. And that shift would become even harder to ignore. The second sign came quietly, like a shadow slipping into the room. Grandma Ruth had always been a woman of rhythm. Her days had structure, not because they had to, but because she loved the comfort of routine. She'd wake at dawn, hum while brushing her hair, shuffle into the kitchen and start a pot of coffee before anyone else stirred. She'd read her devotionals, water her violets, and sit by the window with a crossword puzzle. But then, mornings began to stretch longer. She stayed in bed until noon some days. The violets wilted. The crossword lay untouched. One afternoon I asked if she wanted to walk to the corner bakery with me. Our little tradition. "Maybe another day," she said softly, without looking up. That maybe became the norm. Her energy was gone, not like the tiredness after gardening, or after a day with the great-grandkids. This was different, it was deeper, it clung to her bones. She'd get winded walking from the bedroom to the kitchen. She needed to rest after brushing her teeth. Getting dressed became an event that took the better part of the morning, and still, She insisted she was fine, but her fine came with breathless pauses, hands that shook when she tried to button her blouse, and naps that turned into entire afternoons lost to sleep. We told ourselves it was just aging, that maybe it was the colder weather, maybe it was boredom, but it wasn't. It was fatigue, not the kind that sleep could fix, but the kind that came from a body slowly pulling back its efforts, conserving what little it had left for the essentials. Her muscles were weaker, her voice quieter, her laugh less frequent. She began turning down visitors, not because she didn't care, but because even smiling had become too much effort. I remember one day I sat beside her on the couch, just holding her hand. She didn't say much. She just leaned into me, eyes closed, breathing shallow and slow. And in that silence I realized something. She wasn't just tired. She was leaving inch by inch, not dramatically, not loudly, but surely. And I kept hoping. She'd bounce back like always, but the next sign made it impossible to ignore, because it wasn't just her body that was fading. It was her presence, her mind, her memories. The day Grandma Ruth forgot my name, I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. We were flipping through an old photo album, one of those thick leather-bound ones with faded corners and handwritten dates. She pointed to a picture of me at 5 years old, in overalls and pigtails. Standing beside her in the garden, she tilted her head. "Is that Lucy?" Lucy was her sister. She had passed away 30 years ago. "No, Grandma," I said gently. "That's me." "Chloe." She blinked. "Right, Chloe. Of course." She smiled, but I could see it, the hesitation, the flicker of embarrassment behind her eyes. And just like that, the conversation shifted. She turned the page. From that point on, the mix-ups came. More often, names blurred, stories repeated. Some days she'd tell me about an event that never happened. Other times she'd pause mid-sentence, searching for words that used to come easily. But what broke my heart wasn't the forgetting. It was the silence. She started drifting into long, quiet spells, sitting by the window for hours, not reading, not knitting, just staring. Not sad, not scared, just distant, like she was listening to something we couldn't hear. I'd sit beside her and ask, "What are you thinking about?" Sometimes she'd answer, "Just remembering." Other times she'd say nothing at all. Her world was changing, and she was already stepping into it. Doctors call it cognitive decline. Families call it confusion. But to me it felt like she was walking backward through her life, one memory at a time. She wasn't losing herself. She was retreating to the places that had meant the most. It was hard not to take it personally. The day she introduced me to the mailman as her niece, I cried in the car. But I learned to stop correcting. I learned to follow her wherever her mind led. If she wanted to talk about a summer in 1948, we went there together. If she mistook me for Lucy, I asked about their childhood, because in those moments it wasn't about facts, it was about connection. I had to meet her where she was, not drag her back to where I wished she still could be, and I started wondering, what else had we missed? Because as her thoughts faded, something else was happening inside her body. Something no one was talking about, something more visible yet still just as easy to dismiss. It began with a scratch. Just a tiny nick on the back of Grandma Ruth's hand from her rose bushes. Nothing deep, nothing serious. We cleaned it up, put on a Band-Aid, and thought nothing more of it. But a week later it still hadn't closed. 2 weeks later it looked worse, red, irritated, tender to the touch. We took her to urgent care, where the doctor prescribed antibiotics. Anne told us gently, at her age wounds don't heal the way they used to. I wanted to believe that was it. Just slow healing, but then came the fever, then the cough that wouldn't quit, then the second urinary tract infection in less than a month. Before that year, Grandma Ruth hadn't needed a hospital in over a decade. Suddenly, she was in and out of doctors' offices, hooked to IVs, swallowing more pills than I could count. Her body, once so resilient, had become fragile overnight, and every illness took a little more from her. She stopped bouncing back. Doctors talk about immunosenescence, the weakening of the immune system with age, but what they don't always say is that, in the final stretch of life, the body isn't just slowing down, it's prioritizing, protecting only the organs it absolutely needs, letting go of the rest. It's not giving up, it's nature, quietly preparing. Her infections didn't always look like infections. Sometimes the only sign was that she slept more, or became unusually quiet, or lost interest in food. There were no dramatic symptoms, just small things we almost overlooked, until they weren't small anymore. I remember sitting with her during her third round of antibiotics, watching her drift off mid-conversation, her skin pale and cool. I remember wondering how we had gone from garden walks to this so quickly, but the truth is it wasn't quick. It had been happening all along, and if I had understood the pattern, maybe I would have known what came next. Because the body by then had already started turning inward, slowing circulation, shifting breath, preparing for goodbye. The first time I noticed her breathing change, it was so subtle I almost missed it. Grandma Ruth had fallen asleep in her recliner, her favorite, spot by the window where the sun hit just right in the afternoon. I was sitting across from her, reading a book, when something made me look up. Her chest wasn't rising and falling the way it used to. It came in waves, shallow breaths, followed by a pause that felt just a second too long. Then a sudden, deep inhale, almost like a gasp, and then it would start over again. I sat there holding my own breath, waiting for hers to return. This happened more than once. Later, a nurse explained it was called Cheney-Stokes breathing. I'd never heard the term before, but I would never forget the sound of it. It wasn't painful, it wasn't loud. It was simply different, like her body was slowly loosening its grip on the rhythm of life. Her hands and feet grew cold. Her fingers, once so warm and full of life, braiding my hair, making pie dough, threading a needle, were now pale with a bluish tint under her nails. Her ankles began to swell. She said her chest felt heavy at night and started sleeping propped up on 3 pillows. Sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night, confused and out of breath, like her dreams had stolen the air from her lungs. Bought a pulse oximeter. We kept a journal, we tried everything we could, but nothing reversed the changes because by that point, it wasn't something to fix, it was something to understand. The body, when it nears the end, becomes incredibly wise. It stops wasting energy. It protects what it can. And eventually it starts to let go of warmth, of hunger, of breath. Grandma never told us she was scared, but I think she knew. There was a peace in her eyes that hadn't been there before. As if she'd made her own quiet agreement with the inevitable. I wish someone had told me sooner what to look for, what it meant, how to prepare. But most of all, I wish I had known the gift of recognizing these signs not as threats, but as invitations. Invitations to slow down, to sit closer, to say the things we always put off, because once you begin to see the signs, you realize time isn't just running out, it's asking to be used wisely. In her final weeks, we stopped asking Grandma Ruth to eat. We stopped reminding her what day it was. We stopped trying to return things to how they used to be. Instead, we focused on what mattered most, not the pills, not the charts, but the quiet. We played her favorite jazz records, soft trumpet melodies floating through the house like a lullaby. We opened the windows when the sun was warm and let the breeze roll across her cheeks. We read to her not because she asked, but because the sound of our voices brought comfort, and sometimes we just sat. No talking. No rushing, just presence. I held her hand while she slept, brushed her hair back when she stirred, whispered stories of our best days, of the time we got lost at the farmer's market and ended up laughing so hard we cried, of the peach pie that bubbled over in the oven and made the whole kitchen smell like summer. She didn't always respond, but sometimes her eyes would flutter, a smile would curl faintly at the edge of her lips, and I knew she was still there, listening in the way only the soul can listen. We no longer hoped for recovery, we hoped for peace, and when the moment came, quiet and soft like a candle flickering out, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a release because by then she had said all she needed to say. And we finally had learned how to listen. If you're watching this and recognizing the signs in someone you love, I hope you understand this. The greatest gift you can offer in their final season isn't to fix or to save, it's to walk. With them, not behind, not ahead, but beside them. One breath at a time. Looking back now, I realize the signs had always been there. They weren't loud. They didn't shout. They whispered. Through a spoon left untouched. Through a breath that paused just a second too long. Through the quiet turning inward of someone who once lit up every room. We often think death comes suddenly, but for many, it arrives gently. One moment, one signal, one shift at a time. And yet in those moments there is a rare and sacred opportunity, not to prolong life at all costs, but to fill the time that remains with love, dignity, and presence. If you're noticing these signs in someone, you loved you, don't panic, don't rush, don't turn away. Lean in, ask them what they still want to experience. Play their favorite songs. Tell the stories they've told you 100 times, because hearing them again makes them feel known. Hold their hand. Sit in the silence with them, because this chapter, though tender and hard, can also be beautiful. Not because it avoids the hendaku, but because it honors it. In the end, it wasn't the medicine or the machines or the interventions that mattered most. It was the soft things, the warm blanket, the laughter in the dark, the shared breath in a quiet room. Grandma Ruth left this world surrounded by love, and because we recognized the signs early, we didn't waste the time we had left. We used it, fully. So if this story has touched your heart, I hope you take this with you. When the body begins to whisper, listen. When the days feel numbered, make them count. And above all, remember, it's not about how many days we have. It's about what we do with them,